I started, the industry was very, very different, as I think you can imagine. The other thing also, I think probably just a bit of the background about me, I have been tutoring for 22 years. When I started tutoring, I had never been able to afford tutoring. So I grew up, we were quite poor when we came to England. In fact, there were some times where we struggled to kind of, I don't know, be able to afford food and things like that and stuff. So I think that the world that I went into, that I saw, who were the sort of the people who could afford tutoring, was a completely different world. So it was a massive eye opener for me, and it was a big learning curve. But anyway, I'll let you know a little bit more about that. And the goal for sort of today's talk is really, as you say, this sort of transformational learning. But what I wanted to do is share with you guys some of the things that I wish I'd been told when I started tutoring, or some of the basic stuff. Some of it might be fairly obvious, but what I've noticed is that with a lot of the tutors that I know, I'm very fortunate to have a big network of really wonderful friends who are tutors. And I think we've found that having ways of models or ways of kind of helping us improve are always fun. So I thought I would share a couple with you. And then if you guys had any ideas on how to improve them and things like that, that would be awesome too. Okay, fantastic. All right, I think pretty much everyone is here. And as I said, if anyone wants to turn on their videos or have any questions as we go, pop your hand up, and I'll do my best to kind of get through those. Now, I have to say very quickly also, before I get going, I had a bit of a technical malfunction with sort of my slides. So I've managed to sort of somehow recreate them with some fancy things and stuff like that, but I will, so I'm going to do my best to kind of recreate it and just, I guess maybe it keeps it a little bit more natural rather than just slide after slide. So, okay, fantastic. So my first ever tutoring job was, 22 years ago. I'd been asked by the agency that I joined to go and tutor her. Her mum had just died and she'd just been taken out of school, and which was, I think, incredibly tough for her. And so she'd been taken out of school and she had sort of full-time tutoring because she hadn't been able to kind of cope to go back to school. And my job was to teach her computing. I wasn't a particularly great mathematician or scientist, but I was quite good with computers, which is ironic now because I teach maths and science. Yeah, essentially I'd kind of turned up at her house, and the agency, the thoughts in my mind of the agency saying, do not mention her mum, be as professional as you can, and just tell her the computer stuff and get her through her exams. And so that's kind of how I turned up, and I had no idea about tutoring. I certainly hadn't had any tutoring, as I said, as a kid. We definitely couldn't have afforded tutoring at all. And I'd not been to private school. I didn't really understand most of the stuff that they done, but I did know my subject, I suppose. So I read through the stuff, turned up, very professional. And I have to say, the first session was an absolute catastrophe. It was, she really didn't concentrate. She didn't listen to anything really that I had to say. We just kind of limped through it. The second session was probably worse, I would say. As I said, I just tried to tell her computer stuff, which she really, really didn't care about. And it was around the fourth session that I finally said to her, look, I don't know how you feel losing your mum. I lost my dad when I was young. And it, I know it was incredibly tough for me. I can't know exactly what you're going through, but I will, if you want to talk about it at any point or anything, then I'm here. At which point she burst into tears, and I was, despite being born in South Africa, I was very brought up English, and I'm crying, bad crying, and she just cried. I thought, I'm going to lose my job. This is absolutely terrible. The agency are going to be furious. They only just barely gave me a chance to work for them, and so this is it. It's over. And after about 5-10 minutes of crying, she suddenly just sort of was like, no one's even talked about my mum. No one's even mentioned. Even my dad won't talk about it. None of my family. Thank you. And weirdly, well, I suppose not in hindsight, not weirdly, but she really opened up at that point, and we started learning. And she actually started showing an interest in computers, which, to be fair, in those days, I guess nowadays tech companies and things are quite cool, but I have to say in 1999, in which this was, it really wasn't. It wasn't cool. And anyway, she showed a real interest in it, to the point that her family was so excited that she was interested. They asked me to start tutoring maths and other stuff with her, and they ended up recommending me to a lot of other jobs. which is fantastic, and that's great. And now 22 years later, I've been fortunate enough to build a career and a whole bunch of tech companies and a whole bunch of other stuff based on this. And also it gave me the freedom to do a lot of other things, including writing films and lots of other stuff, which is great. But I think the why I share that first story is that I think in that first instance, I learned that tutoring, I think it was a real trial by fire, that tutoring was way more than just regurgitating information or just telling facts. I mean, they can get almost everything they need from the syllabus or from books and things like that. But what was it? Now, of course, this was quite an extreme case, this kid who lost her mum, and which is really sad for her. And but I have to say that providing her the space to be able to talk, even if she didn't really need to talk much about it, just knowing that she could. She did say to me, I did actually bump into her years and years later, and she said it was massively transformative for her, just being able to have a human being there with her, and we kind of learnt it together. Other jobs, and I won't bore you guys with all the different all my first tutoring jobs, but essentially I'll kind of keep it brief now, is saying that first one I think was the most transformative for me in terms of learning that tutoring was way more than just teaching. Now that brings me to a model that I developed with a couple of friends who are also tutors. And again, I was very fortunate. Nowadays, tutoring can be quite a sort of a lonely profession in many ways. You sort of might bump into another tutor kind of on the doorstep, but it's very hard to meet other tutors, which is why I love this festival. I think it's fantastic. And it sounds like lots of people have been meeting each other and making connections, which I'll come on to actually in a bit, and why that's so important for us as well as our students. But essentially the key here is that I was very fortunate that I actually ended up being the head of maths and science at a tutoring school for a while. And this tutoring school essentially allowed me to meet lots and lots of wonderful tutors, and we shared ideas. And again, I'll come on to that in just a bit. But one of the ideas we came up with was the idea of, we are trying to use technology here. Which way is it? There we go. Is the idea that a tutor is really kind of an overlap between a coach, a mentor, and a teacher. Now, I don't think anything that I'm saying today is particularly revolutionary. It might be for some people, but I think now the good news is that a lot of this has kind of permeated into the kind of tutoring industry, and so, which is great. But I think this was my view, and certainly the view of a lot of tutors, where we were trying to work out what it is that we actually do. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of go through can anyone tell me what they think a coach is? What do you think, what the difference between a coach and a mentor, but certainly what do you think a coach is? So what I'll do is if there's anyone who would love to talk, you can put your hand up. I think on Zoom you can kind of put your hand up. Otherwise you can just type it into the chat. I don't know, some people might be shy about saying stuff, which is absolutely fine. And while I wait for you to do that, for you to give me an idea of what you think a coach is. By the way, there's no right or wrong answer. I think actually it took a lot of time to kind of work out. I've got an idea of how I define it, but it's by no means the right way. So again, just loving. Yeah, what is a coach? What do you think a coach would be? As obviously a coach could be a big thing that you drive students into, but in terms of learning and growing and development, what would you guys say? A life coach. Okay, so Elizabeth's saying that you are a life coach as well as an English language tutor. Fantastic. Yeah, the wheels on the coach. Fantastic.
There's a great suggestion from Jeremy there, someone that shows you the path to success.
Yes, that's really good. Now, I'm not seeing that one. Oh, there we go. I've got it now. Actually, I'm not seeing that comment. Is that, here we go. Give me a second. Has that one gone just direct to you?
No, that one was before the what is a coach question though, so perhaps that's why.
Yeah, okay, to everyone.
Yeah, I see. Perfect. Yeah. I hear a voice in the background.
It might be easier if I say it.
Yes, thanks, Jeremy. Are you there?
Yep, still here.
So go for it. Please say it.
So, well, what I said was someone that shows you the path to success.
Fantastic. Yeah, showing the path to kind of success. Yeah,
I think of a football coach in the team. So, yeah.
And I think the showing the path to success, and I can see some other great suggestions there as well. I think the mentioning of the football coach is a really interesting one. I think the way that I'm speaking to a lot of friends of mine who are coaches actually, and I've got some friends of mine who are very, very successful coaches and life coaches and things like that. The definition that I quite like for coach is one that someone who shows you, as you say, a path to success, but it doesn't have to be in something that they themselves are an expert at. So for example, a football coach might not be the best goalkeeper. In fact, some football coaches are not even the best footballers. That's not the point. The point is they're being able to kind of push you and move you forward in the direction of really. Now, I'm not going to set definitions here. I think I'm giving an idea, and obviously at some point, if you want me, I can write them all down, the ones we have. But I think the most important part here is opening a discussion for it. So I think that what I would see a coach as being is someone exactly that. They don't necessarily have to be an expert in the thing that they're doing, but they can help push you. I think someone once said to me, they get you to do the things you don't want to do so you can be the person you want to be, type thing. I'm sure there's lots of other cheesy, wonderful ways of sort of putting it. What I might then say is versus, all right, so fantastic, let's have a look. So coaching you help, yeah, find your way. A mentor showing you their experience, I think that's wonderful, that's great. A coach helps you realize what you want, moves towards that direction and supports you along the way, Karen says. Vas is saying, the Americanistic definition of a coach, I find, is creeping into tuition more so with the recent MH Act. There we go. So I think essentially here, and then as opposed to a mentor, where very often I would sort of say a mentor is someone who is showing you a path that they have trodden before. So for example, if you are, I don't know, wanting to become a CEO of a company, you might be mentored by a CEO. I mean, that would be quite useful. Someone who they themselves. Now, I would say that, by the way, I'm not setting this as a set thing. I think it was more just a way of getting tutors to kind of think about what their kind of role is. And of course, a teacher would be someone who actually presents the information to you. Now, you could argue that a teacher would be all of these. The only thing I would say that my mum was a teacher, and many of my very closest friends are teachers within schools and within that kind of context. And I guess a tutor is a sort of teacher. But I think what we're trying to do is, again, it was more just a way, a kind of an idea, a way to get people to think about what your role as a tutor is. And essentially, I think that when you understand what you're doing, I think it can really, really help. Now, I'm assuming most of you guys, probably been tutoring for a long time, and or not. And I think it's something that I constantly question still after 22 years. I'm kind of thinking, well, what is my role here? And by the way, my role might vary hugely depending on who the student is or the students. And again, but the point I was making about my mum being a teacher and lots of other friends who are tutors is, sadly, the way that our education system is, that for a lot of teachers are not able to actually do everything that they would like to do. I know my mum said to me, that she a lot of her job was crowd control, and she was actually not able to actually sit down and really, really coach or mentor individual students. Now that's a massive shame. And by the way, there are some incredible teachers, and I'm sure if we cast our mind back, there were some teachers who were still able to do that, by the way. Within that, I certainly have a hit. And now, by the way, I'm dyslexic. Luckily, I kind of been able to, now I write films and things like that stuff. So, but I have to say that at school, it was really tough for me, and history was probably my least favorite subject until this particular teacher came along who made it my favorite subject. And again, I'm not going to go, oh, dyslexic can't like history. For me, anything to do with writing was something I literally wrote off. And this teacher actually was so inspiring and so wonderful as both a coach and a mentor and a teacher that it really inspired me. So I'm sure we've all got those people who've been able to do it within a school context. I would just say we are really fortunate as tutors to have this one-on-one relationship. Now, one thing, there are certain little caveats to that. We are not therapists, and there are really, really strong guidelines around kind of what you should be doing as a tutor and things like that and stuff. Again, like, for duty of care and things like that, you don't keep seeing. There's lots of that stuff, which I'm not going to go into now because that's not necessarily what we're doing. But I just having a think about what it is that we're doing, I think can help us all. Fantastic. Total privilege to one-on-one. I agree. Yeah, Henry says it's a total privilege to work one-on-one. I agree, Mark. I think it really, really is. And yes, so there are some fantastic teachers out there, which is wonderful. So there are still these wonderful jewels of people who can do this, that can make you almost feel like you're one-on-one within a class. But again, we are very, very fortunate. So lots of the progress that, say, my students find. I'll have a student and you know, they've been struggling for a while, and I come in and within, say, maybe like a month or two, they might, I had one student actually over Easter, and she went from sort of around 20% to 86% in her, you know, kind of in her maths papers just by having spent sort of 2-3 weeks of stuff. Now I have to say, there's obviously a lot of foundational knowledge that would have been in place there. It was just about putting it together. So I'd love to say, oh, I'm that amazing. No, but I think a lot of it was actually just helping her being able to answer exams, being able to help her over the idea that I'm terrible at maths. There's lots of stuff, you know, and I'm using maths as a fairly, you know, just a catch-all for almost any subject that you're kind of doing. I always thought I'm bad at English, you know, so but I meet many students who think, oh, I'm terrible at maths, and in fact their school reports can sometimes say they'll never be good at maths, which is I have actually seen that written, and these kids end up going on and become, you know, doing really, really well, and suddenly their teachers are like, they're a natural. I think we do have this incredible, I guess, well, I was going to say, I mean, there's the great power comes great responsibility type thing. I do think we have a huge responsibility, but we also have a huge gift. And as you say, Henry, there, it's a total privilege. We have this massive privilege to be able to work one-on-one with the students. So with that in mind, I know I'm sitting here, sorry, like with this coach mentor thing sitting around me there. But with that in mind, I'm going to move on to something that I developed called the relate model for sort of tutoring. And essentially, I'd say that, again, when I say develop, it was more just putting the letters on. This is something that I think that all of us do naturally. Okay, so we'll do this naturally. But what I've found is that someone said this to me, one of my mentors, actually, when I was training to be a music producer many years ago, and this guy is one of the most successful music producers of all time. He taught me a lot more about the music bit. Was great to learn from him, but I think it was life stuff that I learned from this guy. And one of the things he said to me, which I've heard elsewhere as well, is that anyone can be great when times are great, right? When things are going good, you know, almost anyone can be great. It's when times are tough that we really get a measure of who we are. And I present these online science and math shows. You know, we started during lockdown. I was contacted by a science, I'm a board member on a couple of tech companies. And one of the board members, a fellow board member, said, look, we've got the science company, will you present these shows to us? You know, and they're going to be like 2,000 or 3,000 kids, and you'll have to talk for an hour, and you'll try not to say too much, and you're going to have to just do these science experiments. I immediately said no. I was like, there's no way. There's no way I can do that. I've been teaching one-on-one, but I'm not a presenter. I can't do that. And after, you know, weeks of him hassling me and phoning me every day, and by the way, I'm stuck in my house on my own with no outdoor space in London, going a little bit mad. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll just do this. And I have to say, those early shows were an absolute catastrophe. They really were terrible. And that's not me just being modest. They were really terrible. I look back on them, I mean, a year and a half later, hopefully I've got a bit better. The lighting's got better in this space, and I've got like microphones here that you can sort of see and all that kind of technology stuff. But I have to say, a lot of how I grew as a person, and by the way, also I think it kept me sane during lockdown, was doing these shows. But I have to say, I had this little card stuck next to my camera that says, how do you deal with failure? Basically, like how are you going to deal with it? And failure came. You know, I made mistakes. I said things that were actually wrong. I'm not going to embarrass myself too much, but I said things that were scientifically actually inaccurate, because when you're dealing with lights and the cameras, and there was one point there was a lightning bolt hit something near there. Yeah, I mean, just all the things. I think there was even a fire alarm and stuff during these shows. And it really is about how you deal with failure. And again, that's the modeling that for the students. And so again, that's the sort of the mentoring part, I guess, is the modeling for them, how you deal with failure. But I guess, anyway, running off on this, I think the key is what I've done is I've sat down with some tutor friends and sort of said, look, what does a good lesson look like? Okay, what does a session that really allows that student to transform and to grow look like? Okay, so I think that the transformative part will come from, you know, from your mentoring and your sort of coaching there, you know, getting them to do things they don't want to do so they can become the person they want to be, or do well in an exam, or at least just survive their GCSEs, right? But there's also that foundation that has to be in place. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I can see that saying, oh, I'm so bad at saying, okay, yeah. You know, the other thing I say a lot is basically. So if I say that, find me. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to try not to say it too much. It's very helpful to spend time thinking about things we usually do without thinking, says Georgina, and I think that's absolutely right. Young people need trusted adults other than their parents to mentor, coach, and guide them more than ever. I think that's absolutely true, especially now, actually, guys. All right, fantastic. So let me get onto this. I know I sort of seeded it a little bit. Now, one thing I really want to quickly say before we talk about this, there was this idea that I kind of threw. I spent a lot of time in self-development. I love that kind of thing. Therapy, I love too. Lots of that kind of stuff, and actually looking at myself, I think is very important. And one of the things that I was alerted to is that in life, okay, that we are going to face challenges and we're going to face support, okay, or face support. We're going to get support. And it was proposed to me a long time ago that every moment in your life of challenge, okay, every moment of real challenge in your life will have also been kind of paired with some form of support that helped you survive it. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. I wasn't totally sold on the fact that every single, but you know what, I think it's just an idea, and I'll leave it with you guys to have a think for yourselves or not. But one thing that I really took from this is that I think your job as a tutor, okay, and I'm going to talk about tutoring. I think some of these things can be applied to teaching as well. For our charity Tutorfair, we partnered with TeachFirst, and actually a lot of the training to build the training and things like that stuff. A lot of the training is very similar. But I'm going to specifically talk towards tutoring here. Is that I think that really, I mean, of course, this applies to teachers as well. But essentially here, your job is to both challenge and support your students. Okay, and it might be that in one session you are just challenging them. Okay, you are literally just, the whole session is just challenge, push forward, let's go. You know, you move up to the next one, and it might be one session you are just there to support them. You are just there to emotionally, right? And again, I'm making the differentiation. You're not a therapist, but I think that there are huge amounts of just being a fellow human being, okay? Empathizing with them, actually listening to what they say, active listening, all the kind of, you know, I mean, there's lots of buzzwords thrown in there, but actually, you know what, a lot of them are really just about being a good human being, right? Actually being there for them and putting yourself in their shoes and saying, do you know what, learning wasn't fun. You know, I constantly, I sometimes hear I hear parents, I sometimes hear teachers, tutors sort of saying, no, come on, maths is fun. Yeah, it can be, but I have to say, for the vast majority of students, their experience is it's not fun, right? Now, by the way, I love science. I did physics at university. I love science. I love learning about the universe. I geek out. I have to say, last night, I just got back to London. But last night I was up, I ended up in a YouTube hole of black holes and things. I love it, right? But the thing is, a lot of my students don't. And actually, if you think about what's going on, right, they're essentially, in many cases, being forced to memorize a whole bunch of just names of things, right, without much context. You could forgive them for feeling a little bit like it's not fun, right? And English was not fun for me. Okay, the way it was taught to me is you're either good or you're not, right? That's just the way it was taught. Rather than, by the way, if you want to do some, you know, do you want to do this? I weirdly now I do actually teach some English. Mostly it's to students and you know who I'm already teaching, and then do a little bit with. But we try and break it down. We're like, okay, what's a simile? What's this? How can we use this? And now again, that's it's not rocket science. Okay. Rocket science, new physics, did a bit of that. I have to say, it isn't rocket science. I think breaking stuff down to make it interesting. But as I said, you're part of this is you are both challenging them and supporting them. And sometimes in a session, you're going to be flipping between the two of them. Okay. And so we have this sort of model that a lot of my tutor friends really like, with this sort of idea that you've got a, essentially you've got a central ring of all the things you know, and sometimes you can actually just draw it for students. You know, you've got your sort of your all the stuff you know, essentially, and that's your kind of comfort zone. And then outside you've got your stretch and your learning zone, the stuff that's actually pushing you to, you know, to be better. And then outside that you've got your panic zone, and this panic zone is actually where we get overwhelmed, right? That's where we are just completely gone. Okay, we just shut down. And sometimes if you're working with a student, you know, you can do some things, you know, and this is the challenge of support. You're doing something here that they know how to do, and they go, yeah, I feel comfortable. I can do that. And then you move them to a point where they are, you know, you're doing something that's a little bit harder. Now, you know, they're now in their sort of challenge, you know, the challenge zone, or their kind of learning and growing zone, right? And it feels uncomfortable, right? It feels uncomfortable to them. It doesn't feel very nice. But essentially, you know, they're growing and they're learning. But outside that is this panic zone. And that's one of the things that I do really, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of it today just because we don't have a huge amount of time. But that's one of the things that I would say is really, really important. And this is where I think empathy and care and putting yourself in the, you know, in the child's or any learner's position is so important. It's where you're actually saying to yourself, like, what's happening to this child? Are they being challenged and they're growing and they're learning, or are they starting to panic? And again, there's lots of indicators, the way they blink, the way they, you know, body language, lots of other stuff that can, and actually don't be afraid. If you're not sure, don't be afraid to ask, right? Say, hey, by the way, I'm also telling myself this, you know, remember I said that, you know, when times are good, we can all be good and we naturally do this stuff. But if we're stressed and it's exam time, we've got their parents going, they are going to get, you know, they're going to get a 9, right? You know, and all these kind of stresses that get kind of placed onto us. We can sometimes forget these things. So I'm constantly reminding myself, I'm like, okay, look at their body language. And I'll just ask them, hey, look, are you feeling uncomfortable with this? Or do you think it's okay? And very often I'll actually draw these 3 zones for students and go, just let me know if you get into the panic zone, because what we're going to have to do is retreat back into the comfort zone for you, just to remind you, you know, we're now doing a quadratic formula or something like that, and they freak out. And I'm like, okay, let's just go back, right? Do you remember how to factorize? Do you remember how to add numbers? Right? Again, not condescendingly. Okay, they do. Okay, you can do this stuff, and we start building up again. But I think that a huge part of all of what I'm just about to say, which is this relate model, is really about you as a person looking at the student, keeping an eye on them. You are aiming to challenge them, to help them grow, right? But you're also there to support them as well. And you will have to flip between the 2 of them. If you can do both at the same time, that is really, really excellent. But I say this is the kind of foundation for everything. Right. Okay. So I'm going to have a look at some of the comments, because I do want to keep this sort of a little bit more conversational. Let's have a look. Being a fellow human being. Yes, that's right. Reasons for youth needing mentors more than ever. Overparenting, overschooling. This is Henry, by the way. Thank you. Overparenting, overschooling, overly directive culture in general. This is testing my reading skills. I hope you're semi-impressed. No, a culture of subtle control and coercion as opposed to trust and openness in how we raise children at home and in school. Young people who are schooled especially have often lost trust in the adult population in general. We have too many agendas for them, too many requirements of them. These are the barriers. I work hard to break down in my relationships with teens to rebuild their trust in themselves and their elders. Long answer, sorry, very juicy, massive question. No, dude, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's absolutely it. And again, this is my point, going back to my point about empathy and caring. Like they're not just... Kids now are not just stressed about having to learn, I don't know, say a date in history, or the important significance of something, or having to just memorize bits of the body. They've also got a lot of other concerns. And for kids today are dealing with stuff that we did not have to. I do, this is this little side thing. I actually do a lot. I love self-development. As I said, I've actually done a lot of parenting. I don't have kids yet. So my friends say, you don't need to. I will. Well, let's see. Hope I will, but I may. But the point is, I don't have kids. But I've done a lot of parenting courses. I've done like a lot of parenting courses. I've also read a lot of parenting books. Part of the reason is that a lot of the parents that I work with will come to me for advice, and I always say, by the way, I'll say what I think, but by the way, I'm going to completely mess it up when and if and when I have kids myself. But it's been really interesting. There was a wonderful book called Simplicity Parenting, written by an educational psychologist who actually worked with kids in war zones, and found that kids in in sort of cosmopolitan cities like New York and London and stuff were exhibiting a lot of the same kind of traits of those, the sort of PTSD and stressing and lots of other problems that some of the kids that he dealt with in war zones were dealing with. And anyway, as I said, rather than just now, but for the book, one of the key points that I took from it was that the job of a parent, say 30 years ago, was to, you know, to educate their kids about the world. It was to, you know, get them ready for the world. And he said that the job of a modern day parent is to protect their children from the world for as long as possible. It was essentially to just literally protect the children, because his idea, whether we agree or disagree, is the world is coming into our homes every day. The news, the dead bodies you see on the news, the violence and things, it is coming into homes, you know, every day. And so the job of a parent, he thought, was to kind of almost protect them from that for as long as possible, because to be honest, they're going to get it anyway. Now, again, we agree or disagree, but I have to say your point really struck a nerve with me there, Henry, about the fact that there are so many, again, there's so much stress on them and things like that. So yeah, sometimes our job, as I say, is just to kind of be supportive, you know, to just show them love. Now, I'm talking love as obviously, you know, as a fellow human being, compassion, care, and you know, as has been defined many times, that the loving relationship of a teacher is being able to see, not say that this kid is wrong, but see the potential in the kids, you know, and things like that. And, you know, Viktor Frankl, lots of that. Again, I'm not going to go into all of it now, but I would say that is, it's just having the compassion that we give to them can be so helpful. Let's have a look. Yeah, I've done an advanced parenting course, says Elizabeth. Yeah, I know. I've done so many of these parenting courses. I have to say, just quickly, there was one parenting course that actually I was doing it mostly because we were actually going to be developing a kind of a course for parents on how to not put too much pressure on your kids, but it's based on the idea of, like, you know, get the most out of your kids, and the real thesis is just chill out and leave them, you know, give them a freaking break. Someone said, language service specialist said, before I had children, I had many theories on raising them, but no children. Now I have children, I have no idea how to raise them. By the way, I'm fully subscribed to that, by the way. I hope sometimes my advice can be helpful to parents, especially if they're being really tough on their, you know, on their kids, or, you know, but when I have kids, it's going to be completely out of the, even with my nephews, it just goes out the window. So there we go. Although Chris is saying, although I find that there's a high level of stress, anxiety in modern day British kids, teens, by comparison with Italy, where I grew up, kids are brought up with many freedoms and broad boundaries. Likewise, although it might not look like it, kids and teens are being brought up in a more natural, organic way with fewer agendas. Okay, which is why and that's Chris saying that. Jeremy says, which is why we don't see children out playing by themselves now. Brains only mature at the age of 25, so young people are going through big developmental phases, often at different rates, says S. Pine. Henry says, interesting, I agree about protecting without too much paranoia or retreating from the world. Fantastic. All right, brilliant. I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on. I'm going to make sure I get through the second part there, and then I'd love to open this up to some discussion. So I'm going to just show you this. So this is the magic word, the relate. Okay. So, and again, I have to say that this is more for me than, or at least it was for me and for my friends, you know, and a lot of the people that I kind of have worked with over the years, to just remind us of what a good lesson looks like, right? So it's sort of almost the foundation for the transformational learning, right? So what is it that actually is a good lesson? Because I think, and again, lots of people have different ideas and you kind of get different ways. It was just an easier way for me to remind myself. And I have to say, when times are good, I do all of these anyway, naturally. At least I can say that to you guys. Who knows? I can say a lot, right? But my key here is that I find that in general we do, right? As human beings, we kind of do. And I realized that the relate is slightly, there we go. Let's recenter that. There we go. Just for anyone who's like, oh, it's not in the center. It may not even be in the center too. You can get your rulers out. Tell me whether it's right or not. Okay, so what does it stand for? Well, now the key here, the first one is ready. Okay, so essentially it's about making sure that our students are ready. Okay, now again, I'm not going to go into all of them in sort of too much detail, but the goal here was just to give an idea, because what I would love to do is encourage you guys to come up with your own, right? To go, hey, actually, you know what? I think, Mark, doesn't know what he's talking about. I think there should also be this. And that is great. And by the way, I really love that feedback, because this is the constant sort of, I guess, the sort of feedback loop that I love. And as I said, tutoring can be quite a lonely profession. There's no real staff room. And so having a forum to kind of share these ideas is so exciting. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and why that's important for us in a bit, basically. Yeah, exactly. Making sure our students are ready. Right. So what does readiness mean? Okay. And by the way, it sounds fairly basic, but again, this is the sort of coaching, mentoring part, right? Have they slept? Right. Have they eaten? You know, it's just amazing that I'll sometimes work with a kid who's come back from school and maybe didn't even eat lunch because they had some club or whatever, and they're sitting there, and you're trying to get this information over to them, right? You're trying to get, you've got your hour, and I'm going to get paid for this hour anyway. But like, do I want to be effective, right? Do I actually want this information to go? And I have to say, in my early tutoring, I just learned, I mean, also coming from my background of, we grew up with very little money, and I had no idea what tutoring was. And these parents, they live in their massive mansions, or they're a royal family, or they're a movie star. You kind of feel a bit in awe of these people, right? You've just come over on a private jet. I kid you not, these are the kind of stories you end up with, right, when you've been tutoring for long enough. But you kind of in this situation, it's very hard to sort of question them. But I think as you go on, you do get a lot braver, at least I'd say, but also just more confident being able to say, hey, listen, you've hired me to do a job, right? You've hired me to get the best for your student, for your children, and yet you're tying our hands behind our back. Like, is there a snack, even if, like, okay, as long as they're not allergic to nuts, there's some nuts. So and again, by the way, I've been writing a tutoring book for the last 15 years and kind of interviewed hundreds of tutors and things like that and stuff. And things have changed so much dramatically. There was even the sort of glycemic index, the glycemic load. It was like, sugar's definitely bad for you, but this is good. And things shift all the time. But what I would say is that just be sensible, right? Can this child really learn if they're really hungry? Are they really, really tired? And by the way, readiness doesn't just, and I don't have time to go into every single one of these. And I'm really happy if anyone wants to sort of make a list of what you think goes into readiness here, basically, because we can all compare notes, right? But what I would say is that I had a student the other day who, she was very comfortable. We were about to start the lesson, and her mum walks in and she goes, "You haven't tidied your room. You haven't done this, blah, 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 blah." And the kid's now so angry and stressed and upset, right, that I have to say the first 10-15 minutes of the lesson I like wasted. As I say, I'm paid anyway, it's okay, but I have to tell you that my duty as a human being. And so I actually was able to say to the mum afterwards, I was like, I understand, I said, I wonder if maybe don't do it just before the lesson, right? Because and of course, whether she's right or wrong, she's upset and it makes it difficult. And actually the mum was like, oh, that's a really good suggestion. Again, without judgment. So sometimes, by the way, and I'm just trying to give a flavor of this, because there's no way I can cover all of this, right, in just this session now. But I guess what I'm trying to do is give you a flavor of the readiness of your students will not just be dependent on just the sleep and the obvious stuff. It actually might be that you are coaching the parents. And again, judgment is a good way to make sure you are either fired or not listened to, right? You're a bad parent because you came in. I'm just like, you know what? I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, just off the cuff, rather than, by the way, after 22 years of experience, behavior like that is going to make it really difficult. Judgmental, right? If I come in and be like, hey, I'm just thinking, like, I don't know, she seemed a bit upset. Maybe we could just not do that before the lesson. Maybe just, that kind of thing, save it till after. And the parents like, okay, we can have a huge effect on the parents, right? And again, as many of you know, and again, my teachers' friends, my mum, who's a teacher, like, pretty much anyone who's an educator knows the parents will have probably the biggest impact, right? And again, there are certain other things, to do with kind of, I guess, with readiness. There's other things, feeling that they feel safe with you, by the way. I mean, there are lots of these little things, like, for example, not having the door closed in the bedroom. I mean, there's like if you're working in the bedroom, try and actually separate the work from the bedroom. Sometimes it's not always possible. Try and work in an office. Try not to have the place where they sleep and work together. It's not always possible, but there are certain steps that you can take. And I think, again, most of those are common sense. If anyone really, really needs them, at some point, this book will come out later in the year. But I think you can use common sense for a lot of this stuff, basically. I'm just having a look. Yeah. Yeah, Katie's. I can't read all of them right now, but Katie said something. Julia, I had to leave a family because the parent was not happy that I wasn't strict enough with the children. I feel that whilst we do need to manage behavior in our sessions, it's not my approach to be so stern. Yeah, and I think, by the way, that is something that a lot of parents can actually take guidance on if you are confident enough in it, right? And I guess it also helps that, you know, that I've been recommended by friends, I guess, because all my work will come from recommendations now, you know, which is, I guess I'm very lucky. But if they trust the agency, they trust, I think there comes a point where you can actually direct them a little bit. And by the way, I have also been, you know, not kept on jobs because I wasn't the level of strictness that they wanted. And that there's only so much you can do. But I do find that there have been parents who've been a little bit dissatisfied with my level of sternness and then realize that actually there are other ways that you can do it. And I say, listen, I don't mind them standing up in the session. I don't mind what they do during a session, but my boundary is as long as it doesn't interrupt the session. So I'll say that to students. I'm like, look, do what you want, right? As long as it doesn't interrupt or doesn't distract from the session. Because if it's distracting, then we're not doing our job, right? Then we are not achieving what we want to do. And very often students can be quite receptive to that rather than you will not do that, you will not do that, you will not do that. No, you know, we'll just say, listen, whatever you want, as long as it doesn't distract. Problem is, a lot of things distract. That's where my boundary is. And I think the parents can start to see that firmness in you and say, actually, okay, I'm up for trying your approach. We'll see how we go. I was away at half-term tutoring in Miami with the family, exactly the same thing. You know, the kid had sort of was very good at distracting and things like that and stuff. And the family were like, oh, they actually said to me, don't be friends with him, because the last tutor became friends with him and then they did no work. And actually, you know what? We're not friends, okay? But you know what? After the sessions, he really wanted to hang out. You know, this kid did want to hang out. So did his brothers. They actually wanted to. They liked me, but I had very clear boundaries. It takes time. It's really time, and that does sort of fit into it. But I have to say, I've had exactly the same experience there, Katie. All right, fantastic. Let's keep going. So now that's the readiness. Now the next one, the E, is engaged. Okay, and by the way, I'm going to show a list on these in a second. Okay, just so you can see what they all are. So you know, don't panic. But essentially, I'm sure you're not panicking. But engaged is essentially your how engaged that student is in wanting to learn. Okay, do they want to learn? Do they know it's important? Okay, why do they have to learn this? Okay, sometimes it literally is just a case of, I'm sorry, you are doing your GCSE, you're going to be judged on this number that you have, right? You know, like, we're going to have to learn it. Sometimes it's really like, actually, you know what, it is a bit boring, but you know, there is this interesting aspect to it. There's a friend of mine who's a wonderful maths teacher, actually, and I've had the privilege to go. I've been very lucky that a lot of my teacher friends have been able to allow me in to observe, you know, kind of sessions and really kind of understand what's good about what they're doing. And he's just incredible. He can take almost any subject in maths and make it interesting. For example, Pythagoras's theorem was actually inscribed, okay, onto Voyager, you know, the space shuttle that is currently heading off into outer space, along with some other information, because it is sort of a way of showing that, you know, we're an intelligent being, that, you know, and that the universal rule of Pythagoras should exist throughout the universe. Look, and I have to say, some students can be like, I don't care. Some students are, oh, really, really cool. Whether it's engaging them on football, I mean, these are fairly obvious ones, right? I have a student who just loves football, and for some reason I was able to calculate mean, mode, median, range on football results. By the way, I'm going to talk about how in just a bit, and that final E is expand. So they shouldn't be just doing this with football, of course, but that might be your way of actually engaging them. Okay, I've done probability with football results, says hello cutie. Yeah, Helen, fantastic. Exactly. All right, now here we go. What I'm going to do is show you the next one. The next ones are learn, okay, and also apply. So obviously this is the teaching part of it, right? And then applying it, actually putting it into questions. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is just put it onto the side there. So we've got them actually there. Which way? There, that side of me. My terrible writing, as I said, tech problems, but there we go. So essentially you're making sure they're ready, then you're engaging them, then you're learning and applying it and making sure that you actually, you know, apply it. You should put it into questions, you show them how to do it. The next one, by the way, is test. Now, this There was a wonderful book that I read years ago, and I don't remember the name sadly, but I'll share the knowledge that I learned. It said that testing, right, is useful because you can see whether students have got it. But testing is also one of the best ways of learning, simply because if a student gets a question wrong, right, if a student, neuroscience tells us, right, that if a student gets a question wrong, okay, and their brain goes into sort of almost like a hunter mode, right? Where the hunter starts looking for the answer for that question. Now, what a lot of teachers do is they mark an exam, you know, they go mark an exam, here's your grade, off you go. Which is an absolute, now again, I'm not teacher shaming, and by the way, I've done that in the past. It's just sometimes easier, you just want to move on. But that is such an incredible opportunity for their brain is now in hunter mode. They don't know the answer to it. And you say, by the way, the answer is this, right? Now, there are various sort of, you know, estimates. So some people think you are, some of the neuroscience sort of looks at being, it's double as effective at learning than just hearing it. Some are saying 5 or 6 times more effective, right? And again, look, I do these parenting courses. I'm trying to constantly grow. We're trying to do this today to learn the neuroscience. It'll shift and change. But one thing's for sure, my students do learn way, way better, right? And they're more engaged when they've got a question wrong, right? Again, as long as you're not shaming them, go bad, you got the question. You're actually like, hey, you got it wrong, but what could the answer be? Here's the answer. Oh, it's that. Oh, I should have known that. That feeling is how exactly, okay, is exactly how you can use testing to be an incredible learning tool. And the last one is expand. Take what you've learned, okay? So essentially take what you've learned and expand it out, okay, to other subjects. Hey, by the way, we just learned that there's a relationship here with Pythagoras, but can you see that relationships exist elsewhere? Or it's making connections, right? So again, what neuroscience teaches us a huge amount about how we learn, okay? And there are some incredible books. There's some incredible resources. There's tons. If you go on a little YouTube journey of neuroscience of learning, there are some really interesting things. And actually what we're discovering over and over again is a lot of what seems intuitive to us is correct, but we're also learning that a lot of stuff that seems obvious is actually completely opposite. For example, one incredible study, and there've been backup studies for this, is to say that actually, you think that you should learn one subject completely and then move on to the next and then move on to the next. Well, actually, the neuroscience is sort of showing us that actually learning it sort of piecemeal, again, within reason, because the setup time for changing between subjects it can be a waste of time in itself. But if you learn something, get it enough to the point where you just got it, then move to another, then do it. By splitting it up, you're actually increasing your ability to learn because, again, the brain is having to access long-term memories rather than just dealing in the short term. Again, I'm not going to go too much into that right now, but what we found is that is just expanding, okay? Expanding on what they have learned, making connections is really important. You can kind of think, the analogy I sometimes give my students is the brain is kind of like Wikipedia, right? There are links between certain pages, right? And the more links there are to a certain page, the more important it feels, basically. And that's, by the way, also how Google's sort of handshake, their original kind of, their original algorithm kind of worked. It was the more links there were to a page, probably the more important this is, or the more references this academic paper has, the better it probably is, even without having to read it. And the same thing it looks like is going on in our brain is that the memories that have the most connections to it are probably the most important and therefore more likely to be sort of kept. Because you have to think about the brain, right? Is constantly, the cells are being replaced. Well, why bother replacing a cell that's not being used? Why bother replacing a memory that's not being accessed? And so we find that obviously that the testing is really good because it takes it out, it accesses the memory, it dusts the book off, and it sort of tells the brain, hey, by the way, this is an important memory, right? But also the number of links to it. So if you can find ways of linking history to biology and linking, chemistry to maths and trying to make these links for the students, well, you're actually massively increasing the likelihood that they will remember this stuff. Because remember, a lot of the stuff they're learning is not important for their survival, right? It is not important for their survival. They, like Pythagoras is not going to save their lives. Maybe, unlikely. Certainly the brain doesn't think so. So it'll just get rid of the stuff that's not important. And a traditional way of learning is, just repeat, which, by the way, actually does sort of work, but it's way less effective. So I think the point is, again, I don't think I'm saying anything too revolutionary in that, but I think what I'm trying to do is just start the debate or continue the debate into, hey, we should actually be using science, we should be using neuroscience, we should be using our experience, we should be sharing our experiences to try and move the entire tutoring industry forward. Which brings me on to this sort of last part here, that what the future of tutoring is. Well, look, we say that for our students, right? We say for our students that there should be challenge and support. Well, there should be challenge and support for ourselves. We are challenging ourselves. We are growing. We are learning, okay, constantly. But we should be supporting ourselves. Now, how do we find that support? Well, the amazing thing, okay, about the internet, especially post and just with this amazing festival here, is we get to share ideas. I get to tune in and listen to other people talking and go, oh, I don't know if I agree with that. I do agree with that. Oh, actually, I do now agree with it. It's really just challenging ourselves, right, to grow and get better, but also find that support. I know that a lot of the the kind of, in fact, there was again, I'm not going to go too far into the story, but Henry Ford and a lot of the kind of, and Thomas Edison and these incredible sort of inventors, they had what they called a mastermind group, right? This was a group of great minds where they believed that the sum, okay, the sum of the parts actually was not as great as the whole. Essentially, the idea that they ended up working as a group. They ended up doing much more than they would have done if they had individually just been working together, or even if you just added them up. And I really believe that. So I kind of talked about it at the beginning here with my friends who are tutors and my friends who are teachers, but my friends who are neuroscientists and my friends who are parents, by the way, and again, getting as much as we can from them. I really believe at some point we do need some form of common room for tutors. That's something that I'm a real stand for. I know that, I've been involved in setting up events for tutors in the past and like weekly drinks and things like that, like other ideas. But I think that now this global community of tutors, I'm really excited, and that's the next sort of stage for me. I've got some other personal creative projects, like some albums and things that I'm working on, but I have to say that the thing that really I'm most excited about now in tutoring is trying to create this sort of mastermind group, this kind of common room to share ideas so we can all get better. And by the way, I'm talking to you as someone who has a lot of experience, but I have to say that's just years. I'm still learning every single day, and I guess that's what keeps it really interesting for me. Anyway, so there we go. I've just talked a lot of that last bit basically here. Keep your eyes open for the specialist tutor hubs for the qualified tutor coming soon. Sweet. You know what? If someone else does it, I don't have to do it. I'm not committed. It has to be me. So this is great. And if you can tell me, if you can share some other places where I can go get more information, I'm going to be very happy. Good. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, if you love the topic or subject, you have an emotional hook, so there's meaning there. That's very effective learning. Yeah, interesting about the Edison and Ford. Now, does anyone have any questions or any comments? I know this is about 50 minutes. I'm not in any massive rush to head off, although you might be sick of listening to my Mark. So yeah.
Not. Thank you, Mark. That was really interesting, this thing. Really interesting. So. As I said before, I think it's really helpful to think about how we do things and why we do things that way. That's why having a community to talk about things with is very helpful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Pleasure.
Well, anyway, as I said, I just thought I'd share some ideas and some places that, that a few of us have been thinking of. But as I say, we want to get it up, to do, as many, I don't know, just to kind of keep improving basically. So does anyone have any questions or comments, even if it is just like, Mark, that's rubbish? I literally, as I say, I definitely welcome the feedback or anything could be improved. Anyone there?
Lots of positivity and thank yous in the chat.
I see. Yeah, I can see one there from, is that you, Henry?
Yeah, shall I just unmute and go for it?
Go for it.
Great. Yeah, really appreciate the talk, Mark. And I'm just interested in that last point of your mastermind group. I'm wondering if you've actioned that, if that's something that you're already doing or something you plan to do in the future.
Well, I think I already sort of do, in the sense that I've got tutor friends who kind of do it. But I think it sounds like Qualified Tutor doing some cool stuff as well. But look, if there's anyone who does want to, connect and share ideas and things like that, like I love it. I'm very organized with my time now, otherwise there's no way I'd be able to do so. But I do have time set aside each week for exactly this, where I communicate with my tutor friends. So if anyone is interested, I'll put my email into the here we go.
The reason why I asked, Mark, is because for a long time I've been involved in setting up tutoring community 5 or 6 years ago, running programs. I'm so happy for Qualified Tutor to now be doing it. I just wanted it for myself, to be totally honest. But I've always wanted to have a forum where a weekly touch in with other professionals to workshop through all of the topics coming up in each of our professions and more broadly lives as well. But it's just the organizing of that, it's the financing of that. I spend my whole life organizing group calls, and I just feel like it's often one call too many for me to want to organize. I run parent coaching calls, I run student group calls, I run community calls. I'm just forever on group calls and Zoom, mostly set up by me. So mostly I was jumping on the opportunity to go, great, I would love to join your call.
Well, we do have a WhatsApp group I have a WhatsApp group with some other fellow tutors. Most of them are sort of people who've been doing it a long time. And look, if anyone's interested, I realized I accidentally private messaged you. Sorry, Elizabeth. that's sorry. I realized that I'm getting better with Zoom. I'm definitely getting better with Zoom. But there we go. I sent it to anyone. Please just email me. Mark at Tutorfair. I mean, I'm not really involved with Tutorfair as a company. The charity is something that I care a lot about. The company does what it does. I don't really have any involvement in that anymore. But the charity is the bit that I really, really care about, and which is nice. But at the same time, also care about tutor engagement and that kind of thing. So please just send me an email if you're interested. And I'm really, I think they even just setting up some groups and just sharing ideas is really, really great. There was I think that just based on what you were saying, there's a really interesting thing that Tony Robbins said, and he said, in order to be happy in life, we have to have safety, right? It's very hard to be happy if you're worried about food or you're in a war or whatever, but you also need learning and giving. And I guess most of that kind of covers Maslow's hierarchy, right? That's his way of just going, but then there's this learning and giving. And again, there are lots of different models for this, but I really liked it because giving doesn't just have to be giving money, right? It's giving knowledge, it's sharing, and also learning. I'm learning every day from my students. Every day my students are like, isn't there a better way? Like, most of my methods I teach in maths have come from students who taught me that stuff. In fact, I would say all of them. I don't think any of the ones from school, but the same thing also sharing with fellow tutors. And I think the moment that and I've seen this happen, the moment you think you know everything, right? You're in real trouble. Then you're in real trouble. So again, sharing ideas with everyone is just, it's really exciting for me. And and again, I know there's this sort of safety, learning and giving, but for me, there's also this kind of connection aspect. I only do projects where I'm working with other people. I don't really like doing stuff on my own at all. So again, being able to share ideas with everyone is really lovely. So please do spam me, or just sign me up to silly mailing lists if you just think Mark is boring. So I'm going to sign him up to something. Cool. Any other questions or anything else?
Could I say one other thing?
Sure.
In response to that? I mean, I just also am aware that we've got a saturated market of online courses, and that many of the commentators I'm tuned into are excited by collaborative learning. So just what you're saying, Mark, in some ways, it's also, that's the juiciest forum for me, is where we actually show up for each other on camera, on Zoom, communicating with each other, rather than isolated learning, buying a course that we never finish. And so there's a great prediction, I feel, in the market for that just showing up, collaborating, actually speaking with each other, sharing ideas is a very progressive element, for the future, for learning, and for all of us as professionals. Well,
I'm super excited by that. I mean, look, you can either message me or Georgina or something like that, and like just say, hey, I'd like to do that. Maybe we set up a weekly Zoom thing or something like that, basically. I'm sure maybe you're already doing that, Georgina. I'm super impressed by everything you guys are doing. I see there is a question, though, from Chris.
Yes, hi there, Mark. Great presentation. Thank you very much. And just wondering if you're able to share the acronym again of RELATE, whether you've got that slide available or you can type it in the chat. Is that possible?
You might be able to see it. I don't know. Is technology failing me and you're not actually seeing it? And I've imagined that there were things going on the whole way through. Oh dear. There we go.
No, we can see.
Thank you.
Yeah, and look, by the way, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Can I quickly say, because it was originally set to be an actual, much like the name The Big Bang Theory, right? It was actually a way of making fun of the universal expansion theory, because they thought this was a little bit of a joke, like I wonder if we could put it into an acronym, and weirdly it sort of stuck. So and it RELATE feels a bit like, we're relating, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I will just quickly say that it was slightly tongue-in-cheek, you know, originally, but somehow it just kind of stuck. And some of my students, it's hilarious, I told some of my students, and some of them are like, Mark, I don't really think you tested me properly on that. And they're like, I'm not sure you were fully, you know, you checked whether I was and I'm like getting feedback from my students about me doing it wrong now, which is, by the way, great, by the way. Again, that's a whole other topic, which is metacognition. And you could do an entire 10 of these just on metacognition alone. But the students knowing these things is really helpful. Share this stuff with them. You know what I mean? Get them to mark you on your lessons, by the way. There we go. That's a good one. Now, I'm aware that it's now 12 o'clock and I know that there is another session. So I'm assuming that people who will sort of leave. I'm happy to stay for another few minutes if there's anyone, if there's any other questions or anything like that. I'll just sit here and be like, dun, dun, dun. I'm sure Georgina's got a life though. Sorry, there's things to do.
Mostly not. It's fine.
So is there anyone else wanted no, looks like that's
Thank you very much.
But anyway,
Mark.
that is not an empty threat. Do email me at mark@tutorfair.com, please. That's the charity one, basically. I do, by the way, and I have to say this just because of my own being a human being. It doesn't have to be with Tutorfair, and honestly, there are tons of amazing charities out there. But think about volunteering, guys. Think about giving something back. Think about it, because I have to say that I feel incredibly fortunate to do this job. I really feel. Again, I came from a very poor background. There's no way I could have afforded tutoring. I've done okay in my life, but I have to say that, like, you know, that there are a lot of people who with just a tiny bit of help could have their lives absolutely transformed. And I really do encourage you guys to do some, find the action tutoring, the Access project. You know, there's so many. I'm mentioning other names literally on purpose because I don't think it has to be in one place. Just do a bit of volunteering. It's such an incredible way, and I promise you, there was a point where we sort of I don't know, you probably know this the whole super tutor movement, right? So it just makes me cringe a little bit. But you know, it was great financially. It was great. It bought some houses. You literally, it was good. But I have to tell you that I was my most miserable at that time. That was the time when I was least happy with my entire life. And I'm sharing this just as a human being. I felt hopeless. I was like, what is the point in being alive? Like, it doesn't mean I was going to commit suicide or anything, but I was like, what is the point? And I really believe that the volunteering and the other stuff that I started to do on a purely selfish level was the most meaningful, most important thing I've ever done. And so, look, it doesn't mean you have to, but look, I have to, in good conscience, give you a sales pitch to just try it, please, honestly. And there are some, and even the training that you receive and the people you meet and it's just the most incredible thing I've ever done. So that's my last thing that I just thought I'd finish up with, basically. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks for listening to me talk. I hope there's some value for you guys in this. And
yes, absolutely.
I'm super looking forward to the rest of the events today. So thanks for organizing this, Georgina. This is my sister's name as well, so I'm particularly,
oh, perfect.
But I have to tell you that, yeah, honestly, like it's something that's really good, and I hope there's going to be a lot more of this. So thank you for organizing this, and I'm sure it's been a lot of work. But and thank you everyone for being here.
Yes, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you everybody for joining. If you've signed up for the All Give Me Everything ticket or the Craig Barton special audience ticket, he started on a separate Zoom link now, so if you're having any trouble accessing that, send me a message. Otherwise, we shall see you all after lunch for some mindfulness with Henry. Okay, looking forward to that one.
Thank you for all the lovely comments as well. Take care, guys.
Thank you. All right.